not usually one to dish out relationship advice, but let me share a tale about why ghosting girls is a major no-go. My story's a bit out there, starting in a mansion and winding up in an experimental facility smack dab in the middle of the ocean. Buckle up for the wildest ride of your life, because I'm about to spill the beans on how my supposedly deceased girlfriend mysteriously returned from the grave with a whole new identity. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi flick, huh? But I swear on my favorite pair of sneakers, this story's as real as it gets. And trust me, it's a doozy worth hearing to the end. From the moment I laid eyes on Lucas, I just knew he was the one destined to rock my world. We were a dynamic duo, a match made in heaven. We both had the looks and the cash, sure, but our connection ran deeper than skin deep in bank account balances. It was true love, the kind that transcends everything else. Or at least, that's what I thought. One day, Samuel and his family were gearing up for a fancy trip out to the country aboard their private jet. Unfortunately, I had to stay behind for school, but I made sure to show up at the airport to see them off. I didn't break down in tears or anything sappy like that. I figured I'd see Lucas again in just a few days. Tops. Little did I know, that airport send-off would mark the last time I'd lay eyes on him. As the days stretched on without a peep from him, I chalked it up to poor cell service. But when he didn't return from his trip after a week or two, I started to worry. And when no one heard a word from his family either, well, I knew something was seriously off. It was all too bizarre. So the cops launched a full-blown search operation. But what they didn't uncover during their investigation, that's what really threw me for a loop. I'll never forget the night the police came knocking at my door, breaking the eerie silence of the wee hours. As I rushed to answer, my mind was buzzing with thoughts of good news. But oh, was I dead wrong? Are you Avery? One of the officers asked solemnly. I nodded, heart pounding, and asked what they'd found. You might want to take a seat for this, the other officer replied, his expression grim. They sat me down and explained that they'd located the wreckage of the private jet. Apparently, it had crashed and gone up in flames deep in the woods, far from any signs of civilization. I can't recall much after that revelation, because the next few weeks became a blur of non-stop tears. School was out of the question, and work was a distant concern as I grappled with overwhelming grief. Depression settled over me like a heavy fog, lingering for what felt like an eternity. A part of me felt as though my purpose in life had been snuffed out, while another part adamantly refused to accept that Lucas was gone. I poured countless hours into researching the accident, scouring for any trace of him. Initially, my parents and friends were incredibly understanding. They recognized that everyone grieves differently, and this was my way of coping. But as time passed, their patience began to wane. I became fixated, my obsession mirroring the unwavering loyalty of Aiden, the dog who faithfully awaited his deceased owner at the train station each day. It wasn't exactly a cheerful comparison, but it underscored the depth of my attachment to Lucas. After all, how could I simply forget him? My mourning transformed into obsession, leaving my loved ones more concerned than sympathetic. I became a shadow of my former self, consumed by sorrow over a high school sweetheart lost to tragedy. Before I knew it, a decade had slipped through my fingers, lost in a futile wait for a miracle. My parents gently urged me to reclaim the life that still lay ahead, reminding me that I was young, handsome, and deserving of happiness. And you know what? They were right. It was time to take that first tentative step toward a new beginning. To allow the new version of me to flourish, I made the bold decision to start anew. I packed my bags and left for the countryside, a place where anonymity awaited, and I could truly carve out a fresh existence. Perhaps I wasn't quite ready to release the grip of the past just yet. Those initial days in my unfamiliar surroundings felt liberating. No pitying glances, no sympathetic murmurs, just freedom. I treated myself to a visit to the local diner, craving not just a milkshake but a taste of normalcy. As I settled into my seat, my attention was drawn to a striking guy around my age awaiting my order. For a moment, I found myself at a loss for words, captivated by the hue of his eyes, reminiscent of Lucas's piercing blue gaze. I was momentarily paralyzed until he handed me my drink. And then, I saw it, the unmistakable glint of a watch, a cherished heirloom that I thought had perished in the flames of a jet crash. Lucas, I whispered before flinging myself into his embrace, inadvertently spilling the milkshake on both of us. Lucas, where have you been? You might expect such a reunion to be a whirlwind of emotions after 10 long years, filled with fireworks and tears. But no, the reality was far more mundane. The waiter simply excused himself to clean up the mess, murmuring into his phone in the process, leaving me to grapple with a flood of uncertainty. Had I mistaken him for someone else? Despite the shared eyes and watch, the faces were different. Had I just embraced a stranger? Was he now summoning the authorities? After what felt like an eternity, he returned, visibly calmer. Bracing myself to apologize, I was caught off guard by his unexpected request for my number. He confided that the jet accident had left him disoriented, necessitating numerous reconstructive surgeries and robbing him of much of his memory. Though still grappling with confusion and distress, he expressed a desire to stay in touch. However, he insisted on discretion, at least until he could make sense of it all. I saw getting his number as a total win and wasted no time in exchanging digits. As I stepped out, barely 10 minutes later, I was met with a barrage of hostile stares and chilly glares. It was unsettling. I tried to flash a friendly smile, but it fell flat. No reciprocation? Eventually, an older woman spoke up, accusing me of being a homewrecker. Me. The label caught me off guard. She claimed she saw me embracing the waiter inside and warned me to back off, insinuating that I didn't stand a chance. It left me bewildered and itching for answers. I swiftly texted Lucas, seeking clarification on the street's icy reception. His explanation: just country life, where everyone's business is everyone else's. I was merely an outsider, and they weren't quick to warm up. Apparently, there was this expectation for him to fit into a predetermined role, including a hinted at arranged marriage. His advice: lay low at the restaurant until the locals got used to my presence. It all sounded bizarre, but who were we to judge? We weren't country folk. I fretted over how it might affect our budding relationship. Thankfully, that was the only rough patch. To my surprise, our conversations flowed smoothly. It seemed Lucas remembered more than he let on. It was driving me insane. The constant back and forth with Lucas. I just wanted us to move past the awkwardness and be together. But every time I brought it up, he insisted on keeping things to phone calls, citing his shyness and the need to work on himself. That was putting it mildly. On the phone, he was a poet, declaring his love with every word, even serenading me with songs. But in person, total opposite. He'd clam up, barely saying a word. I'd catch him at the grocery store, and he'd turn tomato red before fleeing in the opposite direction. After months of this, I grew tired of the lack of progress. We hadn't even been on a single date yet. As the hopeless romantic that I am, I decided enough was enough. I may have taken a little too much interest in Lucas's work schedule. It struck me that what we needed was a grand gesture to move our relationship forward. Okay, maybe it sounds a tad stalkerish, but hear me out. I had it all planned out. Picture this. Friday night, the busiest time of the week. I whipped up a Team Lucas shirt, adorned with hearts, and dolled myself up to the nines. I was ready to make a scene, in the best way possible. I mean, who wouldn't be thrilled to see a good-looking guy making a romantic declaration? Well, I was about to find out. As I walked in, all eyes turned to me. Not that it was unusual. Standing out was par for the course in our small town. I made a beeline for the jukebox, queuing up one of our favorite love songs, and flashed a wave. In my mind, I was the gallant hero, sweeping in for the grand moment. I approached him, heart-pounding, and poured out my feelings. And then, without hesitation, I leaned in for that long-awaited kiss. I thought I nailed it. It was my big romantic gesture, just like Lucas had done for me once. But when I glanced around, there was no applause. Just horrified stares and snide photos being snapped. I must have looked like a total weirdo. Turning to Lucas for reassurance, I found him wide-eyed and stunned before he bolted in the opposite direction. Feeling the weight of everyone's judgmental gaze, I braced myself for what came next. Out of nowhere, a little girl dashed up to me, fire in her eyes. "Stay away from my brother, Henry," she spat. "I've seen you lurking around his work. He's got a girlfriend, and she's not some freak like you." Before I could even muster a response, she vanished into the crowd, leaving me stunned and speechless. The embarrassment washed over me in waves as I replayed the scene in my mind. It hit me, showing up unannounced at a guy's workplace with his face plastered on my shirt, all because I'd memorized his shifts. I was officially a stalker, and to top it off, I still had no clue who this Henry guy was. Lucas never mentioned having a sister, let alone a girlfriend. Feeling the sting of rejection, I dialed his number over and over, only to be greeted by his voicemail every time. Was he seriously ghosting me again? Frustrated and feeling a bit sneaky, I decided to dig deeper. After all, if I was already labeled a stalker, might as well embrace it, right? A quick search led me straight to Henry. Living in a small town had its perks, like easy access to people's lives. I found his picture and confirmed it was him. Not only that, but he was clearly taken. His photos were plastered with another girl. Armed with this newfound information, I hopped in my car and headed to his place, conveniently located just 5 minutes from mine. As I approached the door, voices from inside caught my attention. It was Henry, or should I say, Lucas, and a girl engaged in a heated argument about cheating. She was throwing photos at him, demanding explanations for his actions. I seized the moment and rang the bell, interrupting a heated argument between Henry and his girlfriend. His girlfriend. She was the one who'd been giving me grief all this time. "You've got a lot of explaining to do," I barked at him. "He certainly does," the girl retorted before storming out. Henry dashed after her, pleading for her to listen, as if I didn't even exist. Frustrated and hurt, I shouted at him about how he couldn't ghost me again after 10 years, but he only looked more bewildered. "You know what? Fine. If you won't listen to me, then I'm out," I declared, my voice heavy with resentment. "It was a mistake to come here, and a bigger mistake to waste my life waiting for you. Whether you're a liar or a cheat, you're definitely an idiot." I didn't stick around for his response. I stormed back to my house and began packing. Tonight, I was hitting the road, leaving my past, and Henry behind. I refused to be the loyal dog waiting for its owner any longer. I was my own person, and I wasn't about to wait around for him. Returning home, I found my house defaced with graffiti and garbage strewn about. An old woman screamed at me from her porch, and I realized leaving tonight was the safest bet. As I drove, Lucas bombarded me with calls and texts, but I snapped back at him. He wanted to talk, to explain, but I was done listening to his excuses. Yet, in a moment of weakness, I agreed to meet him at an address he provided. What did I have to lose? At this point, the cabin was remote, nestled in the woods, nothing too remarkable. Stealing a deep breath, I approached the door, only for it to swing open, revealing a blue-eyed boy around my age, sitting in a wheelchair. He looked a bit older, with burn scars on his arms, but there was no mistaking it. This was Lucas. "I never wanted you to see me like this," he admitted, a touch embarrassed. My eyes welled up with tears as I wrapped him in a tight hug. As it turned out, Henry's version of events wasn't far from the truth. Lucas had been ejected from the plane before it crashed and erupted in flames. He had desperately crawled towards the wreckage to rescue his parents, but the explosion had scorched his arms and hurled him into a tree, leaving him paralyzed. A kind family had found him and rushed him to a hospital, but his memory had been scrambled. He'd been living with his friend Henry ever since, trading his pricey watch for this cabin in the woods. "Why didn't you call?" I pleaded, my heart aching. "I would have taken care of you." He confessed that he hadn't regained his memory for a while, and when he finally did, he didn't want to burden me with his struggles. "I thought you had moved on. You're quite a catch," he confessed. He went on to explain that Henry had called him after the milkshake incident, seeking advice. Lucas had told him to give me his number and let me decide. "I couldn't resist talking to you, even if it was selfish of me to pull you into this mess," he admitted. Despite the wheelchair and the scars, he was still the man I'd fallen for all those years ago. With a kiss, we sealed our reunion. Lucas and I returned to my hometown, where he began seeing top doctors. There's hope that he might even walk again someday. In the end, true love proved to be worth every moment of waiting. "Give me his number and let me decide. I couldn't resist talking to you, even if it was selfish of me to pull you into this mess," he admitted. Despite the wheelchair and the scars, he was still the man I'd fallen for all those years ago. With a kiss, we sealed our reunion. Lucas and I returned to my hometown, where he began seeing top doctors. There's hope that he might even walk again someday. In the end, true love proved to be worth every moment of waiting.